Hey you guys, and welcome to the syllabus video. It may be helpful for you to have a copy of this PDF open as we go through the syllabus. And if not, if you can see what's on your screen in terms of the printing and stuff, that's fine too. The point here in the format of this syllabus video is that I'm going to give you the nuts and bolts of what's in the syllabus, a brief little summary of who I am, so that you have a better understanding of what's going on in the course. And so this is sort of like the first day of class when you have to go in and read the syllabus with the instructor. So a couple of things to note right off the bat. You may be you are all in Philosophy 11, Introduction to Critical Thinking, but some of you are in different sections. Now, there's no difference between these two courses, except that there are two different slots in Canvas. So what does that mean? None of you will change from one section to the other. It just means if you see another section number up there, mainly one that ends in a 4, and you say, oh my gosh, I look at my schedule and I see it's 7. No, you're good, right? This video is exactly the same for both classes because both classes are exactly the same, right? Okay, so here we go. Let's start off Philosophy 11. We have two sections for this course. This is taken in the fall of 2018. I am your instructor, Professor Vid. This is a course in critical thinking through Long Beach City College. And our very first quote, I'm going to pull out here, is from Jose Vasconcelos. I'm sorry, when it converted to PDF, it muted his name there. That's terrible. And this quote, I want to extend a great thanks to Professor Garcia, who helped me to translate this particular text. I had the rudiments of it down, but it was sort of pidgin Spanish. It didn't quite read right. And of course, he helped me with all the connotations and so forth. So thank you, Professor Garcia. The book quote that we're interested in here reads, "Only books will lift this country out of ignorant cruelty." And what this wonderful philosopher is talking about is removing ourselves from our more base instincts and instead championing the part of our mind that involves rational thought or reflective thought. And the only way to get out of cruelty and ignorance and bias and prejudice is through education. And so that's part of what we're looking for here in this course, is to try and sharpen some of our duller instincts. Now, I'm not saying that you guys are dull. You're not at all. It's just that this course is in some ways very much about being human and understanding the ways in which we're very good at fooling one another, more specifically the ways in which we fool ourselves. And hopefully by the end of this course, you'll have a better understanding of how the person who is most likely to fool you is yourself. And if you get that under your hat, you're going to be great, right? You're going to do super well. So let's get to the bare bones here that everybody wants to hear about, your grade. The grade in this class, how is it determined? Okay, there are 3 components to your grade in this course. Half of your course is based on quizzes. These are quizzes that you take online after you've watched my lecture video, after you've looked through the notes. They're usually multiple choice. There are a couple of short answers possibly here and there, but predominantly it's multiple choice. Those are the nuts and bolts. Are you learning the concepts of the course? Are you able to recall things? Are you able to kind of navigate those kinds of exams? Okay, so that's half of it. The next portion of your grade is a paper. This paper will be written about Roswell, New Mexico, an event that occurred there in 1947. That's worth 25% of your grade, and most importantly, you are always eligible to rewrite your paper. So if you get your Roswell grade back and you say, oh my gosh, you know, I got a C, I really need a B or an A, you can come to me and you could message me and you say, what do I need to do to increase my grade? What do I need to do to the paper? And I'll tell you exactly what you need to do to change the structure, word choice, clarify your analysis, and so forth. And we'll go through that. Now, some people say, oh my gosh, you know, you're crazy, right? Why would you let people rewrite a paper? Real simple. Writing is about committing to a process. And virtually no great work of literature or fine piece of writing, there are some exceptions, just come out perfectly the first time. Writing is something that you get better at when you practice it. And so that's the goal of this class. So that's your paper. You're going to be given very specific instructions about how to lay it out, what it's going to be about, and how each paragraph will flow to the next. The last portion of your grade is the presentation. This is the last thing that you do, and it is the most fun. Most students like this portion of the course the most because they have the greatest amount of freedom in choosing what they're going to present on. Now, you actually don't have to present. This course is entirely online. You won't be coming to my office. You won't be performing somewhere on campus. You don't need to videotape yourself, not at all. Your presentation will be a PDF of your slideshow. And the slideshow will have a particular format which will track very loosely our critical thinking framework, but that's the general idea for the presentation. So again, these are all components of your grade, and they are determined by this grade scale here. Now this is straight Long Beach City College grading scale. Some of you may already know this. If that's you can skip forward the whopping 10 seconds. LBCC does not do plus or minus. So if you get a 90.1%, you have an A. If you do 100%, you have an A. If you do 89.99%, you get a B. So keep that in mind as you're rolling through. You'll have access to your exam, your grades as this course unfolds. But if at any point you have a question, sometimes for some students, for instance, an old quiz imports into they say, what is this extra quiz, right? If at any point you have a question about your grade or what you're going to be doing next, I want to encourage you guys to message me. And the way that you'll do it is through Canvas. I'll get to that later, but I don't want anyone to feel like your grade is something that you're unable to access until the very end. You should know how you're doing as you go along, because getting that immediate feedback is important so that you can then adjust your study habits accordingly because you're doing better or worse than you thought. Okay, so now moving on. Our next quote is from Mary Wollstonecraft, a fine philosopher. And her quote reads, "The being cannot be termed rational or virtuous who obeys any authority but that of reason." And what Mary Wollstonecraft is getting to there is simply that anyone can have a kind of base prejudice or ignorance, right? And kind of go with that. But in order to be rational, in order to be good, we have to really and truly apply our rational mind so that we're not just swept aside by a sea of our own ignorance. And part of what we're doing in this class is to try and get there. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't follow your heart or, it's all about your intellect only, but too often in society, we don't focus on the rational elements of how we think, the logical side of us. And so the point of this class is to try and bolster some of that of you, right? Some of you in that sense. Now, for lots of you, it may be the first time you've ever done that. That's okay. It was the first time I ever did it too when I took the course, and I made it through to where I'm teaching it. So most people have not taken critical thinking before, and I want you to realize that with regard to philosophy, it's probably a pretty even playing field. So while you're studying, if you run into terms you haven't seen before or concepts that are unfamiliar, chances are everybody else feels the same way, and that should be something that you become accustomed to. All right, next thing are our 3 student learning outcomes. So these are things that we can measure that you will have done or be able to do by the close of the course. The first one is analyze arguments and components of arguments. The next is distinguish between examples of inductive arguments and deductive arguments. And the last is evaluate inductive arguments for strength, cogency, and or presence of fallacies in speech or text. Okay, this is all Greek to you guys, but I will give you the postcard from 50,000 feet so you have some idea what we're going to do in this class. We are going to learn to study arguments in this class. And by arguments, I mean just a kind of a structure, a way of thinking that involves what you're trying to prove and the reasons you have for thinking that, right? Or the reasons that support that proof. This is an unusual thing for lots of people because in our media, we're more accustomed now to sound bites, right? Somebody says something very funny, it's on the news, and then that's the news cycle for a couple of days. Instead, what we want to do is try and get away from that very fast food kind of thinking and instead move into a more rigorous style of thought where we say, okay, this is what I want to prove. Do the reasons that I have for that conclusion actually prove it, or have I committed an error? And those kinds of errors are what we call fallacies. And there are different kinds of ways of supporting arguments. You can have premises that completely guarantee an argument's conclusion, or you can have premises that just support it. So I have just distilled these 3 student learning outcomes for you into plain English. If it still doesn't make sense, that's okay. This material, what your student learning outcomes are, it's not on your first exam. These are things that you'll know and you'll learn as we move through the course. Next up, our paper is going to be on Roswell. And Roswell is, in fact, an American myth, folklore. Some people think it's real. I want to stress from the beginning, if you think Roswell is real, that's fine. I don't, and I'll get to this later, I'm not here to tell you what you do or you don't believe. Instead, I'm here to teach you how to think about these things. And that will make the reasons that you have for believing those things much better. So I've had students who've taken this course and they are absolutely convinced Roswell was real. They've written papers to that end. They've attempted to counter arguments that have been presented, and they've done super well. They've gotten A's. And I've had students who've taken this course who say, no, Roswell is nonsense. It is a bunch of nonsense, and I don't believe it for a second, and here's why. And those students have done well. So you shouldn't feel like the way that you feel about any of the topics in this class will be what you are graded on. Instead, I'm going to grade on how you argue. That much being said, the reason why I chose Roswell is because it's more fun, right? We're going to learn critical thinking the way that the state of California wants us to learn it, but we're going to do it without appealing to political or economic arguments. Instead, we're going to study the paranormal, which are these sort of exciting fringe cases in which it looks like there's something that isn't necessarily something we've seen before, or maybe it's something outside of what we think nature is doing, and so instead we think it's supernatural. That can be ghosts, it can be monsters, it can be aliens, it can be all sorts of things. So this course tends to be pretty fun to take. One of the sections that we cover, Second Sight, is the study of ESP and whether or not there are genuine psychic powers. Now, for some students, they absolutely believe that they have psychic powers, and for others they don't. And for any opinion that exists with regard to psychic or ESP powers or paranormal powers, I've had a student who's held that belief and done very well. So again, I'm not asking you guys, do you really think there are psychics? Instead, I'm saying, what's the evidence for psychical phenomena, and does that evidence merit the hold up to the claim, right? Okay, next up. An important part of understanding how to think critically is to understand perception and how it makes errors, because the way that you perceive things is closely tied to the way in which you think about them. You'll see this a little bit more later on. Next up, we'll also have a section on memories. The reason why we study memories is because it's we are very much assured that on a personal level that our memories are accurate. But it turns out they're not very good. Maybe an example of this might be if you've ever maybe dated someone 10 or 15 years ago. For some of you know that's never happened, it's fine. But then you meet up with them and you chat about events that happened when you were together or something, and you quickly find out that what you recall is very different from what they recall. Now you both could be wrong. But in each case, you're still super confident that you're remembering it properly, but research shows that you're not. And so this becomes important because a lot of examples of the paranormal, people being visited by UFOs, people seeing ghosts, people seeing Bigfoot in a forest, those kinds of things are often only supported by memory. And so we have to evaluate to what extent are those memories faithful to the original event. And it turns out memories just turn out, they just end up being more of an active process. Your memories aren't really pictures frozen in time. Instead, they're stories that you tell and retell, and each time you tell and retell it, it sort of changes. But you don't need to believe me for that now. Next up, I just want to encourage all of you guys to, really the goal of this course is to control your mind, or someone else will. Now, I don't mean this in some very, very harsh, George Orwell sense or some fascist state sense. I just mean, generally speaking, advertisers are really good at taking your money because they know more about what you want than you do. And so that's one way in which you can maintain a sort of faithful view of the world if you understand how people around you, whether those ads are for products or for politics, how those ads tend to manipulate and warp what is otherwise rational thought. So what I want for all of you in this course is not to become like me, but I want you to become like you, and I want you to form your own opinions and have the ability to inspect those opinions that are opposed to you in a rational, meaningful way. Okay. Next up, we have another little sequence here. This is where we have more of the meat and potatoes of the syllabus. You'll notice my office hours are listed here. No, you don't need to attend my office hours, but if you do, that's fantastic. These are my student hours, and I want to encourage you all to attend them if that's possible. You don't need to. Many students are able to message with me online, and we're able to pretty much nail, even complex questions on email. So I don't ever want anyone in this class to feel like they're bothering me if they email me. You're not. Before I was a professor in philosophy, I was an attorney. And that was a great job, but it also wasn't perfect for me. My wife and I, we were together at that point. We were married, and she said, you're miserable. You should think about something else. I did love to teach, and a friend needed a course taught, and I subbed for that semester, and I realized after the second class I should have never gone to law school. I should have stayed in graduate school, and I eventually did make it back to academia. Now, why this long, boring story about me? I want to reassure you guys that I'm sure people have had courses where professors are not necessarily available, they're not engaged, they don't care anymore, right? And that's not me. I've had the most terrible of terrible jobs in the sense that, every day I go into work, it's a fight with either my client or the opposing counsel. And here I'm actually able to help you guys. And that's really meaningful to me. So I don't ever want someone to feel like, oh, I keep emailing him, or I emailed him yesterday. It's been 24 hours and I haven't heard anything. If you emailed me and a day has gone by, email me again, right? I mean, 24 hours is enough time. And so if it's something that I missed, and I don't usually miss emails, but if that did happen, I want you guys to feel comfortable messaging me and saying, hey, I'm kind of dangling here. And when you're working online, it's really difficult if you message somebody and then you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting, and it just destroys your momentum. So I try to get back to you as quick as possible, and you are never a bother. So please message me. This job is a joy for me, and I'm happy to have it, and it's really my duty to help you guys learn. So never hesitate to contact me. It is never a bother. Another quote here from Aristotle. Upper left-hand side, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And that's what I want for every one of you, to be able to judge evidence, opinion, and reasoning impartially, right? And to be able to say, oh, this is an interesting idea. Let's see where it goes. If what you said is true, what would have to follow? All other things being equal, is this the most simple explanation of what's going on? These kinds of ideas, these kinds of rational tools you will develop throughout the course. All right, course catalog. I'm going to read this baby out loud. It's going to come across as gibberish, but we'll read out loud once and it'll make more sense as the course goes on. This class focuses on the improvement of practical reasoning skills. Students will be required to improve their reasoning skills and will learn to detect and avoid common argument fallacies. Students will develop the knowledge and habits needed to make decisions between conflicting ideas and beliefs. Applications are made to both contemporary and perennial issues, such as current political events, the news media, science versus pseudoscience, and capital punishment. Okay, so in this course, we've already covered some of that, but what we're going to focus on here are sort of fun, scary stories. And the reason why we do this is if my reasoning works in cases where, just a second, hold on. Okay, sorry about that, you guys. I do have two wonderful kids, and they tend to interrupt whatever I'm doing. So there are a couple of videos I cut this summer where they jump into the video. I apologize ahead of time. I understand you don't want to see my children, but it's sort of part of the hazard. So you can always fast forward through it. But we periodically have these kinds of hiccups. So, okay, we already covered student learning outcomes. I wanted to mention our required texts and materials. And this is the most important thing. This is a free book. We're part of the Open Educational Resources program here at Long Beach City College. I taught courses for many, many years where the textbooks were so expensive and students just couldn't afford to take the class. Maybe they'd get a waiver for the tuition, but they couldn't actually afford the $70, $80, and up cost of textbooks. I've also had classes where students didn't buy the book, but they shared it with other people. Bottom line is, textbook costs sometimes keep students from succeeding. And we live in the time of, the internet, right? Where huge amounts of information, massive repositories of information and text are at the stroke of your fingertips. And so finally, the educational model is caught up with the free flow of information, and I'm able to offer you guys this course without you guys having to make some publisher rich by buying their textbook. So our textbook, it's a great one, is from Matthew Van Cleve, and I have the link here, but I think we'll work out okay because the way that this course is set up, we do most of the notes each module. So you're going to be looking more at my notes than you are the textbook, but the textbook is nice to have available if you have any questions. Okay, we've already covered those course requirements previously. Let's talk about course contact. There's no doubt in my mind, and there shouldn't be in yours, that the best way to contact me is in Canvas. In Canvas, it's the best way to get me. I check it most regularly. It ties me immediately to what your section is, so you don't have to say, hey, Professor Vitt, I'm emailing from this section, right? When you hit me through Canvas, I already know, oh, this student is attached to this class. So that's super nice. Also, in my experience, LBCC email is not always super reliable. I've had half a dozen cases where somebody emails me on a Friday, it's not in my inbox, it's not in my inbox, it's not in my inbox. Tuesday morning, oh, it suddenly appears, right? So I think Canvas is sometimes a little more reliable than email. Another way to contact me would be on social media. You can contact me on Instagram at Professor Vitt or on Twitter at Professor Vitt. But I want to stress something right now. It's super important. Those are personal accounts. Those aren't school accounts. So you'll see pictures on my Instagram that, may be of a political nature, or you might think they're of a political nature. The same with Twitter, right? I'll always hit like on things that I like. Professor Vitt tends to be very liberal, and that's really tough for students who are sometimes. And I get that because I've been on the other end of the spectrum where I didn't share my professor's view on something and I felt like I needed to conform to that viewpoint just to get a good grade. So I want to stress to everybody right now, the last thing that I want for you is to think like me. There's a real temptation to think, well, if everybody in the world thought like I did, we wouldn't have any problems. And the reality is that's just not true. Large groups of people do better when you have more people who think differently. And that's what I want for you. I don't want you to think like me. I don't want you to feel like you have to hit like on something that I post that you just absolutely don't agree with. So you could check me out on Twitter and Instagram if you want, but you don't have to. And most importantly, I really and truly, and I'll mention this below, I really and truly believe in diversity of opinion. And my job is not to make a bunch of students who agree with me. It's just not. My job is to make you the best person you can be, so that when you're out there, you can voice your opinion and see things from your own perspective rather than just being told to think a certain way, right? So long and short, social media, I'm there, I love it, but there's political stuff on there, and some of that is, for some people, it's just not part of the course, and they worry that there's going to be some kind of recourse against them if they don't share my views. Nothing could be further from the truth. But I wanted to stress that because I've been in those circumstances, and I don't think that's fair to students. I think that's an abuse of the educational process. All right, so now we get down here to commitment to viewpoint diversity and constructive disagreement. I'm going to zoom in just a smidge here. This is a statement that was drafted by Heterodox Academy. This is an academy of professional academics, people mostly at universities and colleges who feel like academia is becoming way too one-sided. We notice particularly conservative voices are often stifled in academia, and that's a real problem, right? People need to be able to voice their opinions without recourse, and it's bad if they're not able to. So in order to create a classroom environment that supports respectful, critical inquiry through the free exchange of ideas, the following principles will guide our work. Treat every member of the class with respect, even if you disagree with their opinion, or maybe it should say, especially if you disagree with their opinion. Bring light, not heat. Reasonable minds can differ on any number of perspectives, opinions, and conclusions, right? From whether West Ham is the greatest team, a soccer team, or Juventus, or whomever. I'm sure soccer fans are saying LAFC or something, of course, right? But this kind of constructive disagreement sharpens thinking, and it helps you and your interlocutors, the people that you're debating with, and it will deepen your understanding, and it will reveal for you new and novel insights. So I don't just encourage you to engage with this material, but I expect you to. And all viewpoints, hold on. Sweetheart? Okay, here we are. Sorry, again, kids, right? My son. Okay, so no ideas in this class are going to be immune from scrutiny, right? Not mine, not somebody else's. All of our ideas, we will look at critically. But you are not graded on your opinion, right? I don't care what you think. I care how you think. That's more important to me. I feel good when my students are out there making the arguments that they want to make, and they're not fallacious. It is irrelevant to me what the position is, right? I just want them arguing well. Freedom of speech. Look, you guys are entitled to freedom of speech. I mentioned the California Ed Code here, and I don't ever want you to feel like you can't express yourself in the way that you'd like because you're worried about retribution or punishment or something like that. Okay, next up. Note about dropping the course. I only mentioned this because there was once a misunderstanding. I don't drop you from the course. You will need to do that through admissions and records. So if you email me and say, "Oh, Professor Vitt, will you drop me?" I will just refer you to admissions and records. I'm not able to do that. I don't process that on my side. So that will be up to you. This class proceeds on a modular basis. So the one thing that trips people up in this class is that they wait until the end to start a module. They'll look at the schedule and say, "Oh, this module opens on the 13th, and it's not due until the 28th. That's 15 days. I've got nothing but time." And then something goes wrong, and they don't have as much time, or they start the assignment, they start the lecture, and they realize it's a lot more work than they thought, and then they get caught up. So I would encourage you guys, when those new modules open up, and I'll email you, when they open up, go ahead and take a peek at the workflow and say, okay, how much time am I looking at here, and start it early. Next up, once again, just a content disclaimer, and I can focus all of your attention right here on that one sentence. This course doesn't grade you on what you believe, right? That's nothing I can change, and it's nothing I want to change. But I want you to have beliefs that have better foundations. That's really the point of the course, right? Internet access is a must. This course is entirely online, and so you need to be able to access the internet in order to complete it. Your email account should be current with Canvas. Next up, just a note here on academic integrity and plagiarism. All right, what does this mean? It means write your own paper and do your own work. If you don't do that, and I establish that you've documented, if I can document that you've cheated on this paper, maybe you hired somebody to to write it. Maybe you cut and pasted a couple of paragraphs from someone else. You run the risk of getting an F on that assignment and having it sort of left in your permanent record. Now, many times this is not a problem. The only time, most of the time where I run into this problem is when a student is getting an A or a B and they're working really hard and they just run out of time. So they cobble something together, cut and paste, and send it in. The students who are getting a D or an F, they're going to get the D or the F, right? They just won't turn in the paper. It's the student who has something to lose that turns in a paper that they didn't write. If you are ever in that situation and you feel like, my gosh, I really, really need to get this turned in, but I won't have enough time or I'm not able to write it, before the deadline, contact me, and I will happily help you out. We can extend the deadline. I can help you look at sources. I can look at what you have drafted. I can answer any questions, and I'm happy to do that. But don't feel like you're ever in a position where, oh my gosh, my back's against the wall and I must do this. Just email me. Hey, something's gone wrong, and things do. Can I have an extension? And that's a better way to handle it than feel like you've got to do something that you don't want to do and copy someone else's work. Okay, student success centers, those are incredible, and I would encourage each and every one of you to go down and visit student centers so you can get just help that you're already paying for, right? Now, we don't have a designated center for introduction to critical thinking, but there are lots of help. There is lots of help for writing and reading in those success centers. Next up, we have access services. Those are fantastic. I leave those for you to review. Veterans and eligible family members, I would encourage you to go to our Veterans Affairs office. Veterans, thank you for your service. Most people, myself included, do not understand the level of your sacrifice and duty for the country, and I appreciate what you have done. I have 2 great kids because of you. Thank you. I would encourage you to take a peek down there and just see if there's anything that might be helpful. It's always good to have community, right? Next up, Career and Job Services Center. You know, it's funny, I mention this regularly, but it's true. I have a friend who finished her resume and had it professionally revised and updated. And the cost for, I think it was like, her resume was 2 pages and change. It was over $1,000 for her to have that done. And you can go and get the same services when you go to Long Beach City College and you show them and you say, gosh, I don't even have a resume, or I've got a resume. Can I clean it up? Can you help me? If you're looking for a job, you're looking for interview skills, go down there. You're paying for it anyway, right? People take tons of money to go to headhunters to try and get the best job and to do those things. And I would encourage you to go down to the Career Services Center. I think it will be very helpful. Okay, assignments. I'm going to mention this real briefly down here. Well, we'll mention the assignments at the end. We'll mention that at the end, excuse me. Okay, so now, sorry, we're on a total free fall here. Here we go. Okay, academic freedom. Some of the essays, topics, issues that we're going to be studying in this course will include the objectionable use of language and adult topics, as long as those things are pertinent to the learning process. It's not my goal to come out here and curse all the time, right? But it's just the nature of education that you're going to run into something that you may find objectionable. And that's fine, but we can't let that lead to disrespectful behavior. Now, this is usually not a big problem in this course because we're all online, but it has happened before in discussions where people really take things personal. Don't take it personal. We will critique ideas in this class. We will not critique each other in that way, right? This is a fast-paced course, so I encourage you guys to all stay on top of it. Okay, last note. This is our class schedule. And these are our topics, and these are our dates. Now, these are going to move a little bit depending on how well you guys are doing and so forth. So I've had courses, for instance, where people have all finished Module 1 within like 2 or 3 days, and I go, well, what the heck? Let's live dangerously and open Module 2. People want to do it, they can. I will never, ever shorten a due date. So if I make a mistake and the due date for something is, you know, October the 22nd. I will never say, oh, you guys, it's going to be the 21st or it's going to be the 9th. I'll never move deadlines up, but I will push them back. And that is just an adjustment that sometimes we have to make for the benefit of the whole class. So keep that in mind. If you see any chunks here, like, oh gosh, Professor Vitt, I'm leaving and I'm going to be out of the country for 2 weeks in October, fire me an email. Let me know ahead of time so that we can work something out so you don't miss that module. Lots of people have trips and lots of people have things come up. The number one rule in this class is, remember, this is my dream job, and when my little inbox goes da-ding, I go, all right, I'm happy to hear from you, not unhappy. So don't feel like you have to hold back. Even if you think it's an obvious question or something simple, fire it out, right? It gives me an excuse to do something. Okay, that covers our syllabus, you guys. Just as I'm summarizing a couple big things from each page, this is our class schedule, but it will change. And if it changes, it's going to change to your benefit. Next up, academic freedom. You're going to be exposed to things in here that you'll find objectionable. For instance, I've had students who feel that ghost stories or UFO stories are even semi-demonic, right? They just think that they're totally inappropriate. From their worldview, it's not the object of study. Absolutely, that's a worldview, and you don't need to change your mind because I'm here teaching this stuff. Instead, you can use the arguments that we have to address those concerns, right? That's the point of education, is not to avoid things that you disagree with, but learn how to counter them. Learn what is good about that viewpoint, and if anything, and take that and move on. All right, next up, let's see. Academic integrity and plagiarism. Again, don't cheat. It's better just send me an email and get an extension. Freedom of speech. I want you guys to have it in there. I don't want you to feel like your speech will be, how do I put it, infringed upon because I don't want to hear something, right? You have brilliant ideas and you've had a host of unique experiences. Those things have shaped your brain, and the point of this class is to help you to continue to develop along that route. All right, best place to contact me, Canvas. There's our grading policy, and I think we're good on this syllabus video. So if you guys have any other questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. I am happy to help.